The housekeeper was pregnant with my husband's child. My husband said, "Accept her as your second wife and her child, or pack your bags and give up everything you own." I choose to remain silent. The next morning, he panicked when he realized I had vanished, taking with me the documents that would collapse his life. Before we begin the story, to those who like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, we pray that your fortunes are multiplied, that all your affairs are smoothly run, and so that we can create other exciting stories. Let us begin the tale. Do you think loyalty has a price, Marcus? The question slipped effortlessly from Eleanor's lips as they sat on the second-floor terrace of their luxury home, overlooking the glittering lights of the Seattle skyline from the height of the Highlands. The night air felt colder than usual, carrying the scent of wet earth from the late afternoon rain. Eleanor slowly sipped her jasmine tea, her sharp eyes focused intently on her husband, who was busy with a gadget in his hand. Marcus chuckled softly, a laugh that once sounded warm to Eleanor's ears, but now felt like the coarse scrape of sandpaper. Why the sudden philosophy, darling? Loyalty is a commitment, and commitment is the foundation of our relationship. Eleanor offered a thin smile, one that didn't reach her eyes. She knew well that beneath those sweet words lay a rotting lie. For several months now, something had been different about the atmosphere in their home. The calm and dignified ambiance now felt suffocating with secrets, especially since the arrival of Sophia, the young personal assistant who had only worked there for a year. "Is dinner ready, Sophia?" Eleanor asked, shifting the conversation. "Yes, madam." A soft, yet trembling voice answered from the direction of the sliding door. Sophia stood there. The girl wore a maid's uniform that was beginning to feel tight across her stomach. Her face was downturned, her hands nervously twisting together. Eleanor observed the girl's every move. There was fear, but there was also something else. A kind of misplaced confidence that was beginning to grow behind her stooped shoulders. "Sophia, you look quite pale today. Are you ill?" Eleanor asked in a very flat tone, almost a whisper. Sophia only shook her head, but before she could turn back to the kitchen, Marcus suddenly slammed his gadget onto the glass table with a loud clang. Marcus stood up, adjusted the collar of his shirt, and then looked at Eleanor with a gaze Eleanor had never seen before. It was no longer the loving gaze of a husband, but the look of a ruler issuing a decree. "No need for pretense anymore, Eleanor. I think this is the right time for us to speak honestly, as adults," Marcus said. His voice was heavy, echoing on the spacious terrace. Eleanor remained composed. She set her teacup down without making the slightest sound. "Speak honestly about what?" Marcus glanced at Sophia and signaled for the girl to step closer. With hesitant steps, Sophia stood beside Marcus. Marcus's hand, which used to caress Eleanor's hair before bed, now rested protectively on Sophia's shoulder. Eleanor's heart sank, yet her face remained like frozen marble. "Sophia is pregnant," Marcus stated bluntly. "She's carrying my child, my flesh and blood, whom I have waited for during the 10 years of our barren marriage." The words were like a stiletto slicing her heart. Yet, Eleanor did not allow a single tear to fall. She had suspected this since finding a pregnancy test receipt in the trash of Marcus's study last week. However, hearing the confession directly beneath the somber Seattle sky still delivered a tangible sting. "So, what is your plan, Marcus?" Eleanor asked. Her voice remained steady, a strength born from pain that had reached its peak. Marcus took a deep breath, as if gathering the courage to pass the final verdict. "I will not abandon my own blood. I want you to accept her as my second wife, along with the child she is carrying. We will live here together. Sophia is no longer a housekeeper. She is part of this family." Eleanor stared at her husband with a dazed look. "And if I refuse?" Marcus narrowed his eyes, his face hardening. His arrogance as a successful real estate titan in the Pacific Northwest emerged fully. "If you refuse, then get out of this house. Release all the facilities, vehicles, and status you possess. You will leave with only the clothes on your back. Don't forget, everything you enjoy now is the result of my hard work. I built this empire. Eleanor, you merely enjoyed it. Sophia, standing beside Marcus, briefly glanced at Eleanor with a thin, almost invisible look of triumph. But it was enough to make Eleanor's blood boil beneath her calm facade. The young girl felt she had won the life lottery by carrying her employer's child. Eleanor did not answer immediately. She gazed at the expansive garden below, where the roses she had planted herself were blooming. She remembered how she had helped Marcus build his business from scratch, how she had used her family's connections in Seattle to secure their first project, and how she kept all the company's dark secrets under her slender fingers. Marcus thought Eleanor was a bird in a golden cage who would be terrified if the door was opened. He thought Eleanor was a weak woman who would choose to share her bed rather than lose her wealth. I need time to think, Eleanor replied curtly. Good. I'm glad you're starting to use logic, Marcus said with a condescending tone. Sophia, return to your room. Starting tomorrow, you no longer need to do laundry or mop the floor. We will hire a replacement. Sophia nodded obediently and walked away, deliberately ensuring her slightly protruding stomach was clearly visible to Eleanor. Marcus then followed her into the house, leaving Eleanor alone on the terrace. Eleanor stood, staring toward the port in the distance. The night wind swept across her face. She was not broken. She was just counting down. The silence she offered did not mean defeat. It was the calm before the storm that would tear down the entire world Marcus bragged about. You are terribly wrong, Marcus, Eleanor whispered into the night's darkness. You think you built this empire. Let's see who will remain standing when I pull the foundation out from under you in a single night. She stepped into the bedroom, not toward the bed, but toward her hidden private study behind a built-in bookshelf. There was something she had to ensure was safe before dawn broke over the Emerald City. That night, the luxury house in the Highlands felt like a beautiful coffin. Eleanor closed her study door very quietly, making sure the sound of the turning lock did not reach Marcus's ears, who might already be asleep in the master bedroom, or perhaps celebrating his victory in Sophia's arms. Eleanor no longer cared. The jealousy that usually burned had now crystallized into a cold, hard determination. She turned on a desk lamp that cast a yellowish glow, illuminating stacks of files neatly arranged in a hidden drawer. Her hands moved swiftly, without a trace of doubt. For years, Marcus had considered his wife merely a decorative accessory at business banquets, a woman who only understood interior design and art collections. Marcus forgot that Eleanor was the daughter of the late man who held the keys to strategic waterfront land along the Puget Sound. Eleanor pulled out a large, tightly sealed brown envelope. Inside were the original copies of the land deeds and the private agreement signed by Marcus 10 years ago when he was still a small contractor begging Eleanor's father for capital. The letter clearly stated that the majority ownership of the burgeoning real estate company in Seattle actually belonged to Eleanor personally, given as a dowry and working capital. You were too confident, Marcus, Eleanor whispered. Her eyes scanned line by line the documents that proved Marcus had been embezzling company funds to finance his lavish lifestyle and bribing city council officials for smooth progress on the port development project. Eleanor grabbed a portable scanner. One by one, she transferred the important documents to a very small flash drive. Every scanned sheet was another nail in the coffin of her husband's career. She could not make a mistake. If she showed emotion now, Marcus would become suspicious. She had to remain the submissive Eleanor until dawn broke. Finished with the documents, Eleanor moved to the small safe behind the abstract expressionist painting. She took out all her inherited jewelry and a significant amount of cash in large denominations that she had been saving for an emergency. She put all of it into a simple duffel bag that would not attract attention. Exactly at 2 a.m., Eleanor heard footsteps in the corridor. She immediately turned off the desk lamp and leaned against the wall, regulating her breathing. The footsteps stopped in front of her study door. Eleanor's heart pounded, but her hands remained tightly clenched. Eleanor, are you still in there? Marcus's voice was low. There was a slightly drunken slur in his tone. Eleanor took a deep breath and opened the door slightly. She put on a face that looked tired and swollen, as if she had just been crying for hours. I was just reflecting, Marcus. I couldn't close my eyes. Marcus leaned against the door frame. The smell of alcohol wafted from his clothes. He looked at Eleanor with a pitying, condescending gaze. Come on, don't think about it too much. By morning, you will realize that my choice is the best for all of us. Sophia won't take your position as the lady of this house. She will just provide what you couldn't. Now, go to sleep. Marcus tried to touch Eleanor's cheek, but Eleanor subtly pulled away under the pretense of getting a drink of water. Marcus merely snorted, feeling that his wife was truly broken and helpless. He then walked away toward the guest room, where Sophia was probably waiting for him with all the obedience of a servant who had risen in rank. After ensuring the house was silent again, Eleanor returned to her room. She did not sleep. She began typing something on her laptop. A letter of resignation from the Board of Commissioners and a special instruction to her personal attorney, who lived near the financial district. In her head, Eleanor had already drawn up a travel plan. She would not go far out of the city where she could be easily tracked. She would disappear into the bustle of Seattle in a place Marcus would never think of, a place where her childhood memories were securely kept, far from the luxury of the Highlands, which now felt rotten. Approaching 5 a.m. As the faint sounds of the first morning commuters began to emerge in the distance, Eleanor put on a dark hoodie and a simple baseball cap. She carried her duffel bag and exited through the back door, usually used by the groundskeepers. She deliberately left her car. She knew Marcus could track its position through the installed GPS device. Eleanor walked to the main road and hailed a taxi that happened to pass by. "Where to, miss?" the taxi driver asked with a heavy accent. "King Street Station," Eleanor replied curtly. Inside the taxi, Eleanor stared out the window. She saw the Seattle streets beginning to stir. She saw the majestic Space Needle standing tall in the distance. All this time, she felt the house in the Highlands was her world. But it turned out to be only a prison with golden bars. As the taxi drove away from the elite area, Eleanor took out her phone. She removed the SIM card, snapped it in half, and threw it out the window as they crossed a bridge. Now, the Eleanor that Marcus knew was dead. All that remained was a woman ready to take back what was rightfully hers. Marcus might have thought he had delivered the most fatal ultimatum, but he forgot one thing. Eleanor was the person who knew exactly where every crack in the foundation of his power lay. And this morning, Eleanor had just begun to assault those cracks until the whole thing came crashing down. Just as the sun began to peek over the eastern horizon, Eleanor arrived at the station. She would not take a train. The station was just a temporary stop to confuse her trail. She walked into the crowd of people, then exited through a different door to a small coffee shop on the corner of the street, where someone she deeply trusted was waiting. "Is everything ready, Mr. Finch?" asked a middle-aged man in a sharp suit who had been waiting for her. Eleanor handed him the flash drive from her jacket pocket. "Do it now, Mr. Finch. Ensure that by office hours, all company accounts are frozen under the instruction of the trust administrator." Mr. Finch nodded solemnly. "And Marcus?" Eleanor smiled coldly. "Let him wake up in that beautiful house an hour from now. Let him enjoy his morning espresso before he realizes he no longer owns anything he stands on." The silence in the luxury residence of the Highlands broke when the clock on the wall showed 7 a.m. Usually, Eleanor would have prepared black, sugar-free espresso and whole wheat toast on the dining table, complete with the neatly arranged morning paper. But this morning, the expensive teak wood table looked utterly empty. There was no aroma of coffee, no sound of clinking silverware, only an eerie silence. Marcus came downstairs in his silk robe, rubbing a face that still felt heavy from the remnants of last night's alcohol. He glanced toward the kitchen, hoping to see his wife's back or at least Sophia preparing breakfast. However, the kitchen was spotless, as if there had been no activity at all since last night. "Eleanor!" Marcus called. His voice was rough. There was no answer. He turned toward Sophia's room in the back wing. There he found Sophia just emerging, looking confused. The girl was still wearing her nightgown. Her hair was messy, and her eyes looked puffy. "Where is Eleanor? Why isn't breakfast ready?" Marcus asked sharply. Sophia shook her head, trembling. "I don't know, Mas. I just woke up and didn't see Madam anywhere. I went to the kitchen, but all the doors were locked from the inside except the back door leading to the garden. Marcus frowned. Annoyance began to creep into his chest. He thought Eleanor was merely staging a silent protest or locking herself in the room as a form of rebellion against their conversation last night. With long strides, Marcus headed to the master bedroom. He knocked loudly on the door, then opened it without waiting for permission. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made, as if it had never been slept in. Marcus walked toward the closet and roughly pulled it open. Most of Eleanor's clothes were still there, but he realized several important items were missing. Eleanor's favorite travel bag and her jewelry box were gone. Damn it. She actually dared to leave, Marcus grumbled. He reached for his phone, trying to call Eleanor's number. The number you have dialed is not active or is out of range. Marcus threw his phone onto the bed. He chuckled cynically, trying to calm himself. She's probably just staying at a hotel or running to a friend's house for sympathy. She has no one left in Seattle after her father died. She'll come crawling back in 2 days once her cash runs out. But Marcus's confidence began to waver when he entered Eleanor's study. He saw the desk drawers, which were usually locked, slightly ajar. When he checked the hidden safe behind the painting, his heart seemed to stop beating. The safe was wide open, empty. Not only was the cash missing, but the important documents he had entrusted Eleanor to keep there were also gone. No way, Marcus whispered. Cold sweat began to soak his back. He immediately ran to his own study. He turned on his computer with trembling hands, intending to check the company account balance via online banking services. But when he entered his password, an error message appeared on the screen. Access denied. Please contact your corporate headquarters or security administrator. Marcus tried repeatedly, but the result was the same. He then fumbled in his desk drawer, searching for his checkbooks and backup credit cards. They were all still there. But when he tried to call the bank, he received an even more shocking answer. I apologize, Mr. Thorne. Based on instructions from the majority shareholder and the Board of Commissioners dated this morning, all company accounts and affiliated personal accounts have been temporarily frozen for internal audit purposes, the bank officer on the other end of the phone said in a formal, cold tone. Audit what? I own that company. I am the CEO, Marcus screamed, the veins in his neck bulging. We are only executing procedures based on the legal documents we received, sir. The documents state an indication of misuse of land assets whose status is private property under the name of Mrs. Eleanor Vance, loaned to the corporation. The phone in Marcus's hand nearly dropped. His eyes stared blankly out the window. Down there, at his front gate, a black sedan had just stopped. 2 men in tailored suits got out with expressionless faces, carrying large folders in their hands. Marcus recognized one of them. It was Mr. Finch, his late father-in-law's trusted right-hand man, whom Marcus had always hated for being too honest and rigid. Sophia, don't open the door! Marcus yelled to Sophia, who was already in the living room. But it was too late. A terrified Sophia had already opened the door. Mr. Finch stepped inside with an undeniable authority. He looked at Marcus, who was only wearing a robe, with a condescending gaze. Good morning, Mr. Marcus Thorne, Mr. Finch said in a heavy voice. I am here as Mrs. Eleanor Vance's legal counsel. I carry a notice stating that as of today, the occupancy status of this dwelling reverts to its original owner. Since this house stands on Mrs. Vance's family-inherited land and all maintenance costs were drawn from accounts that are now frozen, you are given until this afternoon to vacate the premises. Marcus laughed hysterically, a laugh filled with despair. This is insane. Eleanor wouldn't dare be this bold. She's a nobody in this house if I choose it. She has no power without me. On the contrary. Marcus, Mr. Finch said calmly while handing him a piece of paper. Without Eleanor and her family's assets, you are merely a failed contractor with a pile of debt at the bank. And regarding Sophia, Mr. Finch glanced at the girl, who was starting to cry. Mrs. Vance's message is, if you truly love the child in that womb, Please care for them with the remaining cash in your wallet. Because as of this second, you own nothing else in this city." The world seemed to spin for Marcus. He felt the floor beneath him collapse instantly. In his head, only one question kept ringing. Where is Eleanor now? Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the Pioneer Square district, Eleanor was sitting in a calm, old cafe. She removed her sunglasses, looking out at the street bustle from behind the blurred glass window. She slowly sipped her coffee, savoring the freedom she had long lost. In front of her, a morning newspaper displayed news about her husband's company's massive expansion plans. Eleanor smiled. She knew tomorrow that news would turn into headlines about bankruptcy and scandal. Good, she whispered to herself. The game has just begun. The sky above Seattle's Pioneer Square began to turn gray, overshadowing the sturdy, moss-covered old buildings. Eleanor was still sitting in the cafe. Her fingers slowly rubbed the rough surface of an old key she had taken from her bag. The key belonged to a small loft in a forgotten corner of the old warehouse district, a property Marcus had almost forgotten about, deeming it worthless trash with no high resale value. It was in that loft, amid the siege of modern buildings and shopping centers, that Eleanor kept a history she had never told anyone. She recalled the early days of her marriage 10 years ago. At that time, Marcus was just an ambitious young man in a cheap, perpetually wrinkled shirt. Eleanor's father, a respected landowner in the Northwest, initially opposed their relationship. "That man only sees our land, Eleanor, not you," her father had said, his voice hoarse with age. But Eleanor, who was then blinded by what she believed was love, was adamant. She convinced her father that Marcus was a hard worker who only needed a chance. Finally, her father yielded, but with a very strict condition. He drafted a secret private agreement, stating that all capital and land used for Marcus's business belonged absolutely to Eleanor, and if any form of betrayal occurred, all rights would instantly revert to Eleanor. Eleanor opened her laptop again. On the screen, she saw a notification from the company headquarters security system. Marcus tried to log in to the server using his admin account multiple times, but all failed. Eleanor had changed all the digital access keys hours before she left the house. "You thought I was just decoration in your office, Marcus," Eleanor murmured. All this time, it was Eleanor who built the company's data security system. She managed the financial flow, and she was the one who covered the tax loopholes that Marcus had been playing with. The new phone she bought at the station vibrated. A text message came in from Mr. Finch. "He's in a rage. He tried to physically remove me. However, the police I contacted have arrived at the location to secure the assets. He is now sitting on the terrace, looking dazed." Eleanor did not feel explosive satisfaction. All she felt was a deep emptiness. She imagined Sophia, the girl who might be terrified inside. Eleanor knew Sophia was just a pawn. A village girl tempted by the glitter of wealth, flaunted by Marcus. But Eleanor also knew that Sophia was not entirely innocent. The girl had once intentionally left her lingerie in Eleanor's car, an act of provocation that now felt utterly childish in Eleanor's eyes. Suddenly, a memory surfaced in Eleanor's head. Inside the large vault at the corporate headquarters, there was a document more crucial than just land deeds. It was proof of the bribery Marcus had conducted with a high-ranking Seattle official regarding a waterfront reclamation permit. If that document fell into the hands of the authorities, Marcus would not only become poor, he would end up behind bars for a very long time. Eleanor closed her laptop with a decisive click. She had to retrieve that document before Marcus took a desperate action like torching the office or destroying the evidence. She stood up, straightened her jacket, and stepped out into the humid Seattle air. She called in rideshare service to take her to the city center. As they passed the Space Needle area, she saw a large billboard featuring Marcus's face as the inspirational young entrepreneur of the year. Eleanor could only sneer internally at how quickly the tables turn. Upon arriving at the office building owned by Eleanor's family and leased by Marcus's company, the atmosphere was chaotic. Several employees stood in the lobby with anxious faces, whispering about the news that their payroll accounts were frozen. Eleanor walked in with her head held high, wearing large, dark sunglasses that covered her tired eyes. "Mrs. Vance," the The receptionist greeted her in surprise. "We heard there's a problem with the central system. Everything is under control, Siska." Eleanor cut in with a calm, authoritative tone. "I just need to pick up some personal files in the top room. Don't let anyone in there, including Mr. Thorne, without my or Mr. Finch's permission." Eleanor walked toward the private elevator that took her directly to the top floor. There, in the room she often used to help Marcus formulate business strategies, she felt like she was in enemy territory. She immediately went to the wooden wall behind the director's chair and pressed a sequence of numbers known only to her and her late father. A secret panel opened. Inside, a faded red folder was stored. Eleanor opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, sound recordings in the form of small cassettes, and highly detailed bank transfer notes. This was the time bomb she had kept as insurance in case Marcus ever turned into a monster, and that monster had truly been born now. Just as Eleanor was about to slip the folder into her bag, the room door burst open with a loud bang. Marcus stood there, breathing heavily. His eyes were red, his clothes were disheveled, and his face was filled with overflowing rage. He no longer looked like a great businessman, but like a cornered beast. "Give me that folder, Eleanor," Marcus roared. His voice echoed in the spacious room. "I know you took what was in there. Don't you dare try to destroy me further." Eleanor did not back down an inch. She stared at her husband coldly, while her right hand held tightly to the folder that would determine the rest of both their lives. "You destroyed yourself the moment you decided to bring that woman into my house, Marcus," Eleanor replied softly, sharply. "Give it!" Marcus lunged forward, trying to snatch the bag from Eleanor. A physical conflict was inevitable in the silent room. High up in the building overlooking the Seattle port, which was beginning to be covered by the darkness of the evening, the spacious director's room became a silent witness to the erupting rage. Marcus attacked blindly. His muscular hand tried to grip Eleanor's arm, but Eleanor was not a weak woman who would easily fall. With a swift movement, she dodged to the side, causing Marcus to lose his balance and crash into the large teak desk that was his pride. "Enough, Marcus. Don't humiliate yourself further," Eleanor shouted. Her voice boomed, overcoming the noise from the streets below. Marcus turned around. His face was scarlet, the veins on his forehead bulging. "Who do you think you are?" "You are just a woman I picked up to be my companion. Without me, you are nothing more than the shadow of your dead father." Eleanor laughed, a laugh that sounded both bitter and dismissive. "You forgot who paid off all your gambling debts at the start of our marriage. You forgot who knelt before the investors when your port project almost went bankrupt. You are the shadow, Marcus. You are a parasite who thought he was the protective tree." Marcus charged forward again. This time, he managed to corner Eleanor near the large window that offered a view of Seattle as its lights began to turn on. His hand roughly gripped the collar of Eleanor's jacket. "Give me that red folder, or I won't hesitate to throw you out of this building. I can say it was an accident or a suicide because you were depressed knowing I was going to remarry," Marcus whispered in a terrifying tone, showing how dark the man's soul had become. Eleanor stared directly into Marcus's eyes. There was no fear there, only pure hatred. "Go ahead, Marcus. But you need to know one thing. Mr. Finch already holds the digital copy of everything in this folder. If something happens to me tonight, that data will be automatically sent to the police department and all the media outlets in the Pacific Northwest within 5 minutes. Do you want to be a tenant in a maximum security prison?" Marcus's grip slowly loosened. His eyes trembled, searching for a lie on his wife's face. But he found only cold certainty. He roughly released the collar of Eleanor's jacket, then stepped back a few paces, frantically pulling at his own hair. "You're heartless, Eleanor! You're destroying the father of my child!" Marcus yelled, trying to use his last card guilt. "Your child?" Eleanor calmly straightened her clothes. "The child you made an excuse for to trample on my dignity. If you truly cared about that child, you would never have committed embezzlement or brought Sophia into our home in such a despicable way. You don't love the child, Marcus. You only love yourself and your massive ego." Eleanor walked toward the exit, leaving Marcus, who was now slumped on the floor, mourning his glory that had collapsed in a single night. At the door, Eleanor stopped briefly without turning around. "Starting tonight, I will be staying at the Sakayu loft. Don't ever try to find me there or send your people. Every move you make is being watched by my legal team. And tell Sophia she can have the house in the Highlands for tonight only. Tomorrow, the bailiff will arrive." Eleanor walked out with a firm step. In the building lobby, she saw several security guards she knew. They bowed respectfully, as if knowing who the real power holder was there. Eleanor immediately hailed a taxi and headed to the small loft in the warehouse district, an old building hidden behind a narrow alley, but with a long history for her family. Arriving at the loft, Eleanor tightly locked the rusty iron gate. She entered the house, which smelled of dust and memories. In the simple living room, she turned on the dim light bulb. She felt very tired, but her mind kept working. She took out her phone and saw a message from an unknown number. The message contained a photo. Sophia was crying in front of the gate of the Highlands house, which had been padlocked by security officers acting on Eleanor's behalf. Meanwhile, Marcus was seen fiercely arguing with the police on the roadside. Eleanor took a deep breath. Tonight, she won the first battle. But she knew Marcus was the type of man who would do anything to seek revenge when he felt he had lost everything. Suddenly, a soft knock was heard at the front door of the loft. Eleanor flinched. "Who knows I'm here?" With hesitation, she walked toward the door and peeked through the keyhole. Standing there was a young woman with a messy scarf, carrying a small bag. It was Sophia. Eleanor froze behind the aging wooden door. Her heart pounded, sending a cold sensation down to her fingertips. How could the girl have found her? This Sakayu loft was a small secret that even Marcus had never condescended to set foot in, considering it a slum area not level with his prestige. With a trembling hand, yet full of caution, Eleanor opened the door latch. The door opened with a mournful creak. Before her, Sophia stood with a face that was almost unrecognizable. Her eyes were swollen, the corner of her lips looked slightly bruised, and the clothes that looked so arrogant this morning were now wrinkled and covered in street dust. "Madam, please help me," Sophia whispered before finally collapsing onto the dusty front step. Eleanor remained silent for a few seconds. Her hardened heart tried to find a gap to hold onto the hatred, but seeing the condition of the girl in front of her, her humanity was stirred. Eleanor looked out into the narrow alley, ensuring no trace of Marcus was following them. After confirming the area was safe, she pulled Sophia's arm, helping her inside the house. "Don't think this kindness means I forgive you, Sophia," Eleanor said coldly after seating the girl on an old wooden chair. She gave her a glass of water, which Sophia immediately drank in one gulp. Sophia sobbed. Her shoulders shook violently. "Mr. Thorne, he's not human, madam." As soon as the police arrived and seized the house, he went wild. He blamed me. He said that if it weren't for this pregnancy, he wouldn't have lost his fortune because you wouldn't have had a reason to leave. Eleanor crossed her arms over her chest, listening with a look that remained sharp. "Then he hit me, madam. He tried to force me to abort this pregnancy right now at a back alley clinic in the South End so he could go back and beg you and say all this was just a temporary lapse. I was terrified. I ran out through the kitchen door while he was drunk and smashing liquor bottles." Sophia pulled something from the pocket of her nightgown. A small, slightly worn notebook. "I knew you were here because I once accidentally saw you store this key in a desk drawer, and there was a small note written, Sekayu. I have nowhere else to go in this city. My family in the village will disown me if they know I'm pregnant without a legitimate husband." Eleanor took the notebook, but her eyes remained fixed on Sophia. "Why didn't you go to the police? Who will believe a housekeeper who is branded as a homewrecker of a rich man?" Sophia replied with deep despair. "Madam, I am not asking for money. I just ask for protection for tonight only. Tomorrow, I will go as far away from Seattle as possible." Eleanor was silent. This situation was not in her plans. She wanted to destroy Marcus, but seeing Sophia as a victim of her own husband's violence made the map of her conflict shift. She realized one thing. Marcus was panicking. and a panicking man would act like a wounded beast. You can sleep in the back room. But remember one thing. If you dare contact Marcus or reveal our location, I will personally turn you over to the police on charges of adultery and theft of assets you once enjoyed, Eleanor threatened. Sophia nodded quickly, tears still streaming down her face. After Sophia went into the back room, Eleanor returned to the living room. She couldn't sleep. She took out her phone and looked at the hidden camera footage she could still access from the corporate headquarters. On her phone screen, she saw Marcus in his study, which was now messy. Marcus seemed to be ripping up the wooden parquet floor beneath his desk. Eleanor squinted. She suddenly remembered there was one more secret Marcus had been hiding from her. A floor safe that had never been included in the company's books or Eleanor's personal records. Marcus pulled out a large black velvet bag and several stacks of foreign currency. The man was planning to flee. He would not allow himself to be arrested or live in poverty. He would escape, leaving all the chaos in Seattle behind. So you want to run, Marcus? Eleanor murmured. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine roaring came from the front of the Sakayu alley. Bright headlights pierced through the cracks in the house windows. Eleanor immediately turned off the living room light and peeked from behind the curtains. A large black SUV stopped right in front of the gate. It wasn't a police car. It was the vehicle often used by Marcus's henchmen to settle issues in the field. Eleanor realized her mistake. Marcus wasn't as foolish as she thought. The man might not have known about the Sakayu loft, but he had people who could track the movement of the taxi Eleanor took this afternoon through his network of paid informants on the streets. Sophia, wake up! Eleanor ran to the back room and shook the girl's shoulder. He's here! Sophia's face turned white as paper. Mr. Thorne and his men! We have to leave through the secret door in the kitchen that leads to the next alley. Eleanor commanded in an urgent, low voice. But before they could step into the kitchen, a loud crash hit the front door. The wooden latch groaned, almost breaking. Eleanor pulled Sophia under the old bed frame covered by a long bedspread. Then she herself hid behind a large, dilapidated wardrobe. The front door finally burst inward. The sound of heavy footsteps entered the house. Eleanor held her breath. Her hand tightly gripped an empty glass bottle she had found on the table. The silence of the night in Sakayu was now replaced by a deadly tension. The atmosphere inside the old house suddenly became very cold. Eleanor could hear the heavy breathing of the two men who had just rushed in. They did not speak. Only the sound of heavy boot steps pressing onto the wooden floor. Every heartbeat of Eleanor felt like a drumbeat that could expose her hiding spot behind the wardrobe. Search every corner. Boss said she must be here. The taxi stopped at the end of this alley. The hoarse voice of one of the men broke the silence. Eleanor looked through the slightly opened wardrobe gap. Their flashlights swept the room. The light jumped across the peeling walls. She could see Sophia's shadow trembling violently under the bed frame. Eleanor knew that if Sophia made the slightest sound, everything would be over. One of the men approached the back room. His rough hand pushed the door wide open. He shone his light under the bed. Luckily, a pile of old cardboard boxes and the hanging bedspread perfectly concealed Sophia's figure. The man grunted and turned to kick the wardrobe door where Eleanor was hiding. Crash! The wardrobe shook violently. Eleanor closed her eyes, hugging the glass bottle to her chest while praying silently. Fortunately, the wardrobe looked very fragile and dusty, as if it were impossible for anyone to be hiding inside. The man seemed unwilling to dirty his hands further and moved to the kitchen. Empty! Maybe they ran out the back window, the other man yelled from the living room. Damn it! We have to hurry before a patrol car comes through here. Just burn this place down. That will smoke them out if they are still around here, the first man commanded. Eleanor's blood seemed to stop flowing. Burning a house in a densely populated area like this alley, a fire would mean a major catastrophe. She couldn't let that happen. However, before the man could light the lighter, a faint police siren sound was heard in the distance, getting closer and closer. Cops! Let's go! The sound of the footsteps rushed out, followed by the roar of the car engine speeding away from the alley. Eleanor did not come out immediately. She waited until the atmosphere was completely silent, leaving only the sound of crickets and the ticking of an old wall clock. "Sophia! Come out!" Eleanor whispered after feeling safe. Sophia crawled out, her face as white as paper. She cried silently, her whole body weak. Eleanor helped the girl stand up. It turned out the siren was not from the police she had deliberately called, but an ambulance that happened to be passing on the main road. However, the scare was enough to save their lives. "We can't stay here anymore." "Marcus has lost his mind," Eleanor said. She realized that Marcus was no longer just a cheating husband, but a cornered criminal. Eleanor immediately took out her phone, which she had hidden in her pocket. She called Mr. Finch. "Mr. Finch, send all the evidence to the police headquarters and to the media contacts now. Don't wait for dawn, and pick me up at the coordinates I am sending you." That very night, Eleanor took Sophia and left the Sakayu loft. They sneaked through narrow alleys known only to locals, heading toward the more open Pioneer Square area. Under the dim streetlights, Eleanor saw notifications on her phone. Major headlines on local online media outlets began to appear. Alleged corruption and embezzlement scandal. Prominent Seattle real estate developer vanishes. The domino effect Eleanor created began to work. At the corporate headquarters, several of Eleanor's trusted people, whom she had cultivated over time, began to move, submitting additional evidence. Marcus's power, built on sand, was now being swept away by the tide he created himself. "Madam, why did you save me?" Sophia asked, as they waited for Mr. Finch's car in front of an old church. Eleanor looked at the majestic building in front of her expressionlessly. "Because I want you to see with your own eyes what kind of man you idolized. I want you to realize that the child you are carrying deserves a better life than being a tool to satisfy a criminal's ego." Mr. Finch's black car finally appeared. The middle-aged man stepped out with a tense face. "Madam, the situation outside is very chaotic. Mr. Thorne was detected attempting to cross the city border toward Tacoma in a borrowed car. He is carrying a large amount of cash." Eleanor got into the car, followed by Sophia. "Let him run, Mr. Finch. He doesn't know that all port and airport access is already monitored. He is only digging a deeper hole for himself." As the car sped, slicing through the silence of the Seattle night, Eleanor stared out the window. She saw the buildings she had built with Marcus. Everything felt alien now. She had let go of everything. Wealth, status, and her family name for only one thing: the truth that sets you free. However, Eleanor knew that the final chapter of this drama was not over yet. Marcus had not truly fallen until he faced Eleanor one last time. And the place Eleanor chose for that final meeting was a location that would remind Marcus of his false promises 10 years ago. The old Rainier Brewery complex. "Mr. Finch," Eleanor commanded with an unwavering voice. "The brewery? Madam, at midnight?" Mr. Finch asked in surprise. "Yes, it's where it all began, and it's where it all must end." The old Rainier Brewery complex stood grand and eerie under the dark Seattle night sky. The building, with its towering, historical structure, looked like an old giant watching the sins of men beneath its feet. Eleanor stood in the central courtyard, right in front of a massive column where its base was firmly gripping the earth. The night wind blew hard, playing with the ends of her jacket and carrying a damp aroma from the legendary halls. She had sent one last text message to Marcus's secret number an hour ago. "I'm waiting for you at the place where we first made our promises. Come alone if you want the original documents, or let the police find you on the streets like a hunted dog." Eleanor knew Marcus would come. The man was too arrogant to surrender, and too greedy to let the evidence destroy the rest of his life. Sure enough, a short while later, the sound of hurried footsteps was heard on the cold tile floor. Marcus emerged from behind a large pillar. His face was shattered, his eyes wild, and a backpack was slung over his shoulder. It probably contained the remnants of the fortune he could save. "Give me that folder, Eleanor." "Now!" Marcus screamed. His voice echoed among the open corridors. He no longer possessed any authority. All that remained was the despair of a loser. Eleanor held the red folder high. "Do you remember this place? Marcus, 10 years ago, Beneath this very spot, you swore you would never hurt me. You said you would build a palace for me. It turns out the palace you built was just a prison full of lies. Don't talk about the past! Marcus lunged forward, but he stopped when he saw several shadows moving in the darkness of the second floor of the building. Who is that? Are you setting a trap for me? I am not trapping you, Marcus. I am only giving you what you asked for, Eleanor said calmly. You told me I had to give up everything I owned or accept your wife. I chose silence because, in my silence, I prepared everything. I gave up the house. I gave up the company. And now, I am releasing you. Eleanor threw the red folder onto the floor. Right between them, Marcus immediately lunged for it and hugged the folder as if it were his life. But when he opened it, his face turned deathly pale. The folder was empty. There were only clean white sheets of paper with the large writing in the center. Finished. What does this mean? Marcus roared. The original contents have been in the hands of the authorities for 1 hour. Marcus, right now, the house in the Highlands is being searched. And your arrest warrant has been signed. This old brewery complex is your final door to justice. Suddenly, floodlights from the main gate illuminated the area brightly. The sound of regular police footsteps began to surround the courtyard. Marcus turned to run toward the back entrance, but he immediately froze when he saw Mr. Finch standing there with Sophia. Sophia looked at Marcus with a gaze that was now full of courage. There was no more fear in her eyes. It's all over, Mr. Thorne. There's nowhere left to hide. Marcus fell to his knees. His hands trembled, holding the empty papers. He roared in frustration, a sound that was then swallowed by the silence of the Seattle night. The police immediately advanced and handcuffed him. As he was being led past Eleanor, Marcus stopped briefly and stared at his wife with the last remnants of hatred. You think you won, Eleanor? You lost everything too. Eleanor smiled, the most genuine smile she had given in the last 10 years. I didn't lose anything, Marcus. I just found the me you stole all this time, and wealth can be found. But the honor you trampled upon will never return. After Marcus was taken away, silence returned. Mr. Finch approached Eleanor. Everything went according to plan, madam. The car is ready to take you to a temporary hotel before we handle the restitution of the family trust assets in court. Eleanor nodded. She turned to Sophia, who was standing slightly apart. Sophia, go with Mr. Finch. He will take you to a safe shelter. I will cover the cost of the delivery and the child's future. But after that, you must learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Never rely on a man like Marcus again. Sophia bowed respectfully. Tears of gratitude fell on her cheeks. Thank you, madam. Thank you. Eleanor walked out of the brewery complex gate. She looked at the Space Needle standing tall in front of her. The sun had not yet risen, but dawn was beginning to cast a red hue on the eastern horizon. Seattle was waking up from its slumber. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the clean morning air enter her lungs. She had lost her luxury house, her husband, and her social status in one night. But as she stepped toward the car, she felt much richer than when she had everything. She had won the most difficult battle of her life, the battle against her own fear. Inside the car, Eleanor took a small key from her pocket, the key to the Sakayu loft. She knew that starting today, she would build a new life, not as the shadow of another person, but as Eleanor, the woman who successfully tore down a false empire with nothing but silence and her intelligence. The car sped away, leaving the city center, disappearing among the bustle of the early morning market that was beginning to stir. The silent trail in the Emerald City had ended, leaving behind a legend about a wife who chose to be quiet so her voice could be heard louder when the storm arrived.